All right, make your way in, find a seat, make a friend. We've got 1 minute. Perfect timing for a dad joke. Yes, you can't escape it. All right, now I've gotten feedback around my dad jokes this year, and they're not as good. Last year I used OpenAI to create them. This year I'm using Claude, so I think we know who's winning the battle for the AI. All right, so a really terrible one. Why did the security architect go to the beach? To work on their layers. OSI, sunscreen. Terrible. Thank you. All right. So, yes, finally. I think that's the first applause I've gotten all week. It's great. And they're a really tough crowd. Terrible jokes. Thanks, Claude. Right, so I have the pleasure of introducing a really good friend of mine. That's why I really enjoy doing this gig, so I just ended up hanging out with my mates. So I've known Lidia for I don't know how long, but we run B-Sides Melbourne together. She's been in InfoSec for a little while. Won't use numbers. When they get over double digits, over single digits, it gets a little bit much. But Lydia's, she won't say this about herself, so I'll say this for her. She's an absolutely amazing human, continuously gives back to the community. This presentation is data-driven, research-driven, and this is just a slither of the amount of information she tends to give back to the community. So as she makes her way up on stage, can we have a massive round of applause for Lidia Giuliano, please?
All right. Just checking the slides up there. So, I'm Lidia, and I'm an accidental security architect.
Hi, Lidia.
Hi, Lucas. All right, jokes aside, thank you for coming to my talk. As Lucas said, this is a data-driven talk. I've been a security architect for probably the last 7-ish years, and I've been in security and IT for about, as Lucas said, 25 years. But this talk for me is really important because as someone in the security industry, I hope to consider myself a leader in the industry. I mentor lots of people, and a lot of grads, career changers will often say, your role looks really interesting, how do I get into security architecture? And the challenge that we have is, we don't have a direct pathway. We don't have a direct pathway to security architecture. So, how many sec arcs in the room? All right, hopefully see a few more. If I asked every single one of you how you got into your role, I could almost bet that some of you have a different answer or a different pathway. And my pathway is going to look different to your pathway. Perhaps you started from governance, assurance, perhaps you like to just draw boxes and diagrams. That's what we do sometimes as well. Are we translators? Or do we just attend meeting at the last minute and told we need an approval? That happens all the time. Despite all of this, one thing I have noticed is that despite this being a very, very, very broad role, we struggle to define it. There is no one correct pathway. So how does this help future generations that want to get into this role? Got to have Elmo. Shame on me, I have children. So how do we get there? Do we climb the corporate ladder? Or do we earn our stripes? A lot of people think it's an earn your stripes role. I beg to differ. But we have evolved. If I have a look at my pathway, which I'll get to very, very, very shortly, we've grown as an organisation. When I moved into security, what was vulnerability scanning? We just needed to point, shoot and click. And then things evolved. Secure by design came in. We started doing solution designs. Oh, we need a security architect to look at that. It is an evolving role. And I would say many of the folks here, probably from 35 onwards, most of their career jump would have been because there was a need to be filled, a role to be filled. And that's why there's no real pathway. And many of us have come from all the different avenues, and I'm really excited to share the data that I've got and hopefully try to find some commonalities so that we can share that with recruiters, leaders, managers, people in the hiring process or people in the hiring game. So when you look at my personal pathway, again, not about me, but this is actually quite traditional. I did computer science at RMIT some 30 years ago, a long time ago, and there was no cyber. I just did computer science. And from there, you basically were a developer or you're an admin, all the admins, network admins, security, database admin, all the admins, sort of did all of that. And then there was a need. So I got into security because I could write shell script on Unix, and there was this thing called Nessus, and there was no GUI, and we had to write a shell script to get that thing started, stopped, make sure the network didn't flood, a whole bunch of rules. So again, it was an evolving role. And then eventually engineering, hands-on. I love fixing things, I love breaking things. So you can see now that my experience is widening, my depth is widening, and I'm learning a lot more about the business. And then eventually I got my stripes, if that's what you want to call it, but that's not what this is about. So, the question that I wanted to ask myself is, how do we help the industry? I also did a bit of a search on LinkedIn, Seek, and some of the other job search sites, just to have a look at what do the security architect roles look like? Are they uniform? Are there commonalities? Are they all the same? And what's really interesting is most of them are the same: SecArch, cybersecurity architect, senior architect. But this last one is quite funny. We have a security architect CISO, security data and reporting. I don't even know what the heck that is. It boggles my mind. It is no wonder people are confused. So there does not seem to be any pathway that you can study for. And if there's one thing's for sure, everybody arrives in a different way. We'll eventually get there, but everybody experiences a little bit different. So, the reason for my talk. As I mentioned, I do a lot of mentoring. I get a lot of questions. For me, this is a role that I evolved into, but how do we help the next generation? And I think this is really, really, really important. So, I did a survey, and I went and asked all the SecArchs that would listen to me. I wanted to get 1,000 responses, but I got 332, and I got some pretty interesting data. I think what's really important to know, I've only got 40 minutes, as Lucas said, the data that I've got is enormous. So I've tried to pick the things that I thought mattered. If you are curious to generate some of your own stats, come and talk to me. I do definitely want to put it up on GitHub at some point. It is all anonymised, so nobody's names are there, so we can actually do that research. So, let's look at the areas that I asked the recipients questions on. I tried to do 5 areas. People demographics, so where people are from, age, gender, location, their background. So education, I wanted to see if there was a correlation in education for security architects. I thought that might be interesting. Were you in security before you got into security? And before you got into security, how many years did you do that before you hit security architecture? A bunch of other questions, pathways, how you got into, how you became a security architect. I asked questions about their current job situation. I don't have that in here because I really didn't think it was totally important, but I thought salary might be important, so I do talk about salary briefly. And the role, what are we doing versus what security architects think the most important skill is for them to be successful. So let's go through some of the data. We'll start with the demographics. So what we've got here again, 332 security architects responded. The more green it is, that's the higher response rate that we got. The more red it is, obviously less of the response. So you can see there where we've got folks in Africa and South America, we had about 7 or 8 people respond, which is okay. But the bulk of it was Oceania, obviously because I'm an Australian-based person, and that's where the reach was. But we did get a lot of folks really try to push this out as much as possible. We did get a lot of responses from the Americas, and we got a lot of responses from the UK as well. So As well as demographics, we asked gender, male, female, non-binary, and some undisclosed. And we asked age range from 18 plus to 60 plus. So we've got a whole disparate list of sample set there. So this here basically is showing who responded. So we'll focus on who responded before we move to education. Clearly, it is a male-dominated industry. And a lot of the folks that responded, and we'll see a little bit later down the track, are probably 40 plus. And I think this is not a statistic that we aren't all aware of today. Most of the time, I know when I did computer science, I think I was one of 5 women. IT's always been a heavily male-dominated industry. Don't really care for that one. Okay. Women represent about 12%. Just keep an eye on the statistics because it's growing. And again, and I'll show some more statistics later, but again, the older the sample set, the less women. As we go down towards the 20-somethings, it's increasing. So that's really exciting. And of course, we've got our non-binary and the folks that didn't want to disclose themselves, 2%, but their responses matter as well. So, in terms of demographic observation, we all know that it is definitely male-dominated. We know that it's definitely a mid-career role. We're not seeing too many sec arcs in the 20s, and if they are, there's reasons for that. And so we know most of the sec arcs, or the biggest cohort that responded, were in that 40-plus range. And it's probably a third or a fourth career change as well. And we're seeing really strong female representation in the younger categories, which is great. And that definitely could be an indication of mentoring. But the pathway into sec arc is still not clear. So let's move to education. This was probably my most favourite thing because I actually thought I was going to be able to find gold. Let's see. So statistically, 88% of everyone that responded had some sort of tertiary degree. It could have been a undergrad degree, a master's degree, PhD, or perhaps a postgraduate degree, but everybody had something, and we'll talk about the stages in which they got their degree. But, so that was something that was really interesting. Okay, and 42% of those that had attained a degree, it was also postgrad. And that's a really interesting statistic too, because later when we talk about those that didn't do a degree, you're seeing people that have returned back to school to do a master's degree. All right, what about those that didn't do a degree? 12% might not seem low, it's significant. So these folks, they went to high school, they did not get a degree. And then you've also got a small percentage, under 1%, where they didn't finish their degrees. I have 2 friends, one sitting in the front row in this audience, I'm not going to call her out. She did a biomed degree and did a whole other gamut things, but then transitioned into the help desk. I had another friend that also did history, same thing, she moved into the help desk. So degree is not an indication of a pathway. It helps, it's interesting, but they're probably not required. And I think what I'm seeing and the trends that I'm seeing is that security architecture, perhaps I could even say security for us older folks, is an experience-driven field at the moment, and we hope that's going to change. So, I've got a little comment there, so I'm just going to read it. You can't study your way to becoming a security architect, in terms of the piece of paper. So here's some little captions that I've got here. Again, we already know that we've got a huge number of people with tertiary qualifications, but what was the highest tertiary qualification? Computer science. I'm in that bucket. But why? Because it's a mid-career type of role, and those of us that did computer science, there was no cyber, so that's what we had to do. So that actually makes sense. But I think what's also really important as well is, actually I think that comes in the next one, actually I'll hold that thought for a second. What's interesting here is that probably in the last 15 years, I saw an uptake in postgrad. I'm not going to talk about undergrad, postgrad cybersecurity degrees, and they are people that potentially didn't do a degree, but want to go and do a piece of higher education to help them in their workplace. So we're seeing a lot of that as well. Yep. All right, let's talk about the non-traditional pathways. This is big, like almost 33%, and this is not just people that didn't do high school. These are people that did something different, music, politics. I've even got here theology, law. There's a whole bunch, European politics, and those that didn't go to high school. So non-traditional backgrounds are not an edge case. They're here to stay. And if you're a security architect, you know why coming from these backgrounds are important. All right, so now I've got some stats, a little bit overwhelming to begin with, but let's start with the 60s group. So when we look at gender breakdown, not too many women, but it's kind of to be expected because again, women weren't doing those things, probably maybe move towards nursing or other types of degrees. In terms of their education, a bit of a mix. Again, that tertiary qualifications there, bit of TAFE, a bit of high school. Let's keep moving down because this is where things get a little bit interesting. My age group, lots of males. Females are definitely increasing. We're starting to see a bit of non-binary representation as well. And again, the degrees are definitely there, but 20% just did high school. And I think that is a significant finding and really interesting. Let's talk about the 40s. This was the biggest cohort of people. So what we're seeing with the 40s is that we're seeing more of the people in this cohort are doing cybersecurity postgraduate certificates, not necessarily undergrad degrees. We start seeing that in the 30s and the 20s category. Okay, also because cyber degrees really didn't exist, now they're starting to come up as a postgraduate degree. And again, background of the, oh, sorry, that's the, I've already spoken about that. I'll shut up. I'll keep going. Now, for our 30-something bracket, we're seeing the women going a little bit higher, which is great, which is really, really great. And the gender balance isn't so bad. So hopefully we're doing a little bit more mentoring. It's not as reduced as what we're seeing for the 60s and the 50s bracket. Here, we're definitely seeing the rise of cyber degrees, but also we're starting to see a little bit of an undergrad of cybersecurity. Now for the 20s, this is really interesting. Look at the gender. The gender is getting a lot higher. And I did see a lot of undergrad cyber degrees here. But I would beg to differ that security architecture is an entry-level role. And we will talk about this because I think I've got some really good stats around this as well. And hopefully I've interpreted them right. If you've interpreted differently, let's have a chat. It's good. All right. Just looking at my notes. Yeah, and I think the thing that I was really worried, not necessarily worried, I was trying to investigate in my head here, those that fall into the age bracket, because they're not doing those traditional IT backgrounds, we want to make sure that those that are emerging from these fields, they've got more of a security first approach where a lot of the SecArchs in their 40s plus, you know, we're coming more from that infrastructure, we've got more of that hands-on. So we want to make sure that the people that are coming up, they are playing with tech, they do understand the systems. And I don't know what's necessarily happening in the university, but there's a lot of people that aren't doing those tech degrees anymore. They're just going straight to cyber, perhaps thinking that they're going to get an entry-level role. Security architecture is not an entry-level role. Certs. We all need a cert, right? Everybody needs a cert. I tried to put here all the main certifications regardless of whether it related to security architecture or not, just so that I could get some uniformity and not have complete unstructured data. It was interesting. So I think pretty obvious, the CISSP was the biggest one. I have a CISSP. Does that make me a good security architect? Absolutely not. The CISSP has got, unless it's changed, has got no architectural domain chapters in there. There's nothing really focusing on architecture. However, I don't show it here, but if you have a look at the cohort, the age group of those that did the CISSP, my group. Why? Because there was a stage there where you have to have a CISSP, it's got to be on your resume, you're not going to get picked up on LinkedIn. I still renew it, I probably should change my mind, but it's interesting learning. This was cool, this was really cool. So again, 22% of the architects have the SASPA certification, one that I still don't have because it's a very, very, very expensive certification. But I think this is great. I think this is a really good fundamental. The fundamental one is going to be really good for the future, but not a huge uptake. Is that because of cost? I don't know. And cloud. A lot of security architects had at least one cloud certification. And why? Because many of us that are working with our solution design architects, we're in the cloud. We're using AWS, we're using GCP. And in order to be able to do our work effectively, we need to get into the weeds a little bit and understand what's happening. Otherwise, you're not going to, in my opinion anyway, not going to add value. Is it important for you as a security architect? Probably not. But when you speak to somebody about why do you do certs, it's not because you want to have the piece of paper. It's simply because you just want to uplift your knowledge. You want to do best. You want to do your best. You want to keep being the best person that you can in your field. And I've got a few AWS certifications. Have they helped me as a security architect? Yes. Does it help me become a security architect? No. But it helps me because I can sit with my solution architects and we can talk about the infrastructure and we can talk about the security controls. So I do it just for my own personal education. Other. There was 25%, and I'll actually move to the next slide, there were 25% that actually rejected certifications. And there was some profanity in the responses as well, but we won't go to that. They did not find it wasn't something that they wanted to pursue. But basically 1 in 4 architects don't have a certification. And I think that's pretty significant as well. So what are we seeing here? We're seeing non-consistent pathways. CISSP is common, but it doesn't define security architecture capability, which is my own opinion anyway. Cloud certifications are more consistent, and I think it's because of the nature of our work. And what I'm seeing is that there's no real common stack. Again, pathway problem. And again, according to this, there's a large number of security architects, could be security as a whole, that reject the certification. For me, I think you need to do what helps you get along with your journey, but it's not necessarily going to be a quantifier for you to get into the industry. It might help, but that's what I'm seeing. All right, the next set of the next set of data. There's a lot that I asked in this section. I'm only just trying to pinpoint a couple of them. We took pathways. My job here, what I want to do today is to deliver a blueprint for people that are in the hiring game. So I thought it was really important to ask how long, what work experience did you have before security? Then how much experience did you have in security before you moved into security architecture? So there's a bit of a three-stage process here. So when we have a look at this, how much work experience did you have outside of security? And this could be IT. It could be working at bars, cafes. But the point is, how much industry experience did you have before you moved into security? And you can see that probably that's the third one down is probably my cohort again, because security was not a thing. And that's probably the highest. But then yet you've got 1 to 5. And I met a very special lady yesterday on our table who got through the CyberCX program. She's there because you've got companies like CyberCX that are doing these transition programs. And that's our next generation. What if she wants to become a security architect? What does it look like for her? So that's a pretty huge statistic. So I'm really glad to see that organisations are now investing in our emerging and aspiring security professionals in general. So there's a breakdown, 88 and 72. That's pretty significant. So we've all got some experience before we move into security. We're not just moving into security. Big graph, I know. But what I'm trying to show here is now you've got your background, your work experience. How many years in security did you have before you moved into security architecture? And again, those two rows, again, are telling. You've got your old folks like me, and then you've got your new folks coming in as well. Huge investment. So generally speaking, what we're seeing is that everyone's got about 10 to 15 years experience. I was probably more 10 before I moved into security, and then another 1 to 5 years. And I was probably in security for probably another 7 years before I moved into security architecture, because I kept building and building and building my depth. So key takeaways for this, and I've already said this, but it's good to reiterate. We're not coming from zero, okay? We know the role is broad, we know we need organisational understanding, we know we need good communication, but this explains why so many architects are coming from such a diverse background. We need the diversity of thought, we need the diversity of experience. Sec archs have got a pretty hard job. So I asked the question, before we move on to the next set of data, are security architects created organically through their experience, or rather through professional development pathways? I'm going the first. Anyone else think differently? There you go, Ricky too. I trust Ricky. Probably trust him more than me. So let's keep going. So the next question I asked is, so you're in security. So we're seeing a pattern here. We've got experience, now we've got security experience. How did you move into architecture? So again, I asked 3 questions. Did you move laterally from IT? Did you move laterally from security? A couple of other questions, and then I had a random field. I probably shouldn't have done that. So this is the breakdown. So you can see most people moved to a security architect from security. And I think this is something that we all know. You do see some solution architects move straight into security architecture. There are people where I work that have made that transition, but we're more seeing that people have a security background before they move into architecture. They're growing and they're accumulating their knowledge. And again, there's some that are starting in an entry-level role. I remember a couple of years ago when I was in healthcare, I hired a young lady who was an engineer. She was very new, but she had the passion and the drive, and she kept learning. So she's falling into that. Don't let those people escape. And from an Australian lens, pretty much the same. Not too much difference. So, as I've said, we know security architecture is definitely influenced by IT backgrounds and security backgrounds. So we're seeing people move into this role after years of experience, and for a very good reason. If you're a security architect, you know why you need to have that broad depth. All right, let's talk salaries. Salaries is very important. How much are we getting paid? We get paid. So this is the global scale. 10 minutes to go. I'm going to struggle. Thanks, Lucas. I'll hurry up. Oops, hang on. Let me go back. Hang on a second. All right. So at a global scale, what I've got is I've got it in USD and I've tried to translate it into Australian dollars. So the average sec arch globally earns about 140 Australian. That's not us. We know it's not us. Let's put that to Australian salaries. All right. So what we found is that this is where most sec archs sit. And as someone that's done a lot of recruitment, this is pretty much what I'm seeing as well. Really experienced sec archs fall into the next band. So just based on my own experience, I rarely offer someone 175 unless they're starting out, but basically that's where we're going. But keep in mind, it's not an entry-level role. You're not going to get, I want to be a sec arch, so I'm going to get 250K. You've got to bring this depth of experience. So I think this is really important, because when I was doing those LinkedIn search for jobs, the salaries were everywhere. And so again, this is the sample set only from the Oceania data. There's 125 architects. And we've got some folks that are in that 25K, or in that 300K salary range. Maybe they're contracting, I don't know. But overall, probably those top 2 salaries. Wage observations. I am going to say one thing, even though Shannon might get mad at me, but really quickly, I don't want to make it a focal point. Women's salaries are a lot lower than men. I don't want to put it up here. Come and talk to me if you want it a little bit. We need to do better with our gender balance. It was something like 70K USD difference. It's significant. So we just need to be mindful of that. So we know that, again, very male-dominated. Younger architects have definitely got lower compensation, which you would expect. 160, maybe something like that. And the data suggests that the longer you've been in that role, the more you're going to get paid, because you've got the depth, the breadth, and the experience and the knowledge to work with the business. All right. This is really important. Hopefully I'll speed this along. I wanted to ask my security architects, what do they do day to day? And what are the core skills that they think are important to be a SecArch? Again, building on pathways, blueprints, when you do your job ad, these are the two things that probably you're looking for. I'm just going to put that up there for a second. I know it's a bit bright and white and that goes against everything that I mentor people about. But again, I had a list. I had a huge list of what security architects do day to day. And you can see where the 100% is. So what are we seeing here? Yes, you need to have knowledge of lots of things. But if you have a look at the second one, stakeholder management, we have to be able to work with the business. And that takes experience. We are translators. We can be as technical as we want, but if we are, I always use the example of the boiling water. Okay, the requirement is we need to use boiling water, but the pattern is use a kettle because the kettle has got glass. It's probably certified by some electricity regulation, and you're not going to get burnt. But if the business says, we don't want to use a kettle, we want to use an open stove, and the water's flickering everywhere, what do you do as a security architect? Stakeholder management is important. We need to be able to talk to them about what it means if they go down the open pot with the water splatting everywhere. These are the conversations that we have every single day. So, as I've said, communication and influence is so important. I know many of you might not believe this. I'm an absolute introvert and I will probably curl up in the fetal position after this talk because I've spoken so much, but we have to have those conversations. We need to be able to build trust and credibility with our business. It doesn't matter how technical we are, okay, if we are not on the tools anymore, and we have to be critical thinkers and we have to be able to explain all these things. Compliance is important, but it's definitely not the most important thing. All right, attributes. I'm going to keep going. I've got to go really quickly here. So I asked all of the security architects. This was a free field. This took me forever to make heads or tails out of it. I did not ask the Gen AI tools. I wanted to make sure I was correct as possible. The general themes from all the security architects were communication and influence was number one, absolutely number one. We need to have a broad skill, otherwise we can't help the business and we can't help our projects. Threat modelling, we all do threat modelling as part of what we do, otherwise we cannot communicate what the issues are or what the findings are and how they can remediate that. And human and emotional intelligence, we definitely need that. So again, seeing that it is definitely not an early stage role. All right, what do we find rewarding? And I think this is really important because, yeah, we work for money, but we also work so that we're fulfilled. And I loved some of these responses. These were, again, just free form fields. The first one is probably one of my top ones. I love getting up every day, looking at a design and go, okay, I don't know what the heck I'm doing here, because then it pushes me to learn something new. I absolutely thrive on it. We've got meaningful impact. I've certainly got variety and I'm learning something every day. Work-life balance, I'm not too sure about that. Some people put that in there. At the moment, I don't feel very work-life balance, but this is what comes with being a SecArch. It's the best role, the best role. All right, blueprint. So I'm looking at recruiters, leaders, managers, people that are writing those job descriptions. What does it look like? So I tried to come up with something that I hope is helpful. The first one is having tech foundations. I'm not saying that don't get a degree. My kids, if they can, I want them to go to university. I want them to experience university, but it's not the only pathway to security as a whole. You might just start at a help desk. I was a network admin and a data admin for years, and it was fun. I learned Linux, I learned all sorts of things. So don't close your mind and think that I have to jump straight into cyber. You don't. You need to get onto the keyboard, you need to open up a chassis, you need to look at cards, look at boards and see what's going. I worry that the university aren't teaching those skills anymore. Be curious, absolutely be curious. Security foundations help because you will laterally move into security if you've got that. And I know things are different to what they were 20, 30 years ago, but I don't think they're changing that much. Communication and influence, I've already said that you have to explain to people what it means, what you're talking about. Thanks, Lucas. Almost there. Business thinking. Again, I use the example of the kettle, okay? Yes, you have to use a kettle. It's going to boil. If you don't use the kettle, you're going to burn yourself. That's great, but how does that help the business when they don't have the budget? You've got to help them figure out a way forward. So put yourself in their shoes. We are not the house of no, we are the house of how. That's the way we've got to look at it. And finally, learning about the architecture practice. I mean, this is where you can do lots of search, speak to people, mentoring, or whatever else. And we're there. Curiosity, be curious, have good integrity, adaptability, passion. I love my job. No one's going to move me away from it. I love it. I love helping. And I love seeing the difference in solutions compared to where I was. And I'm running on thin ice here, Lucas, so I'll try to hurry up. Again, I think I've already mentioned this. Experience and reputation for me is absolutely paramount. I like to say architecture is often earned, but it's a trust and a reputation and an operational history. You have got the background, you know how systems work, you can go and talk to those engineers, and that helps a lot. All right, I want to finally end on this note. I'm finishing, Lucas, you can beat me off in a second. Okay, I don't think we've got a skills problem, I think we've got a pathway problem. And we've got that problem because security architecture is so new. Every single role that probably most of us had here came from something that was emerging. So we need to share this. We need to share this knowledge. We need to stop waiting for the accidental security architects, and we need to develop our people. We need to develop their IT skills. We need to develop their people skills and their strategic influence. Okay, we need to stop focusing on the pieces of paper. So when you're looking at resume, don't just pick words. Find someone that you think is going to be able to learn the business. It's so important, and get people from all different caliber. Don't find someone that's you. Find someone that's different. You have to do that. And last, I know we've theme, mentor. I mentor. We've got new people coming into the industry. Mentor them, help them get on their journey. It is not as easy for them as it was for us. All right, most importantly, and I can't see what my slide says here, and I think once we define what the pathway is for security architecture, we can stop being an accidental security architecture practice. That's it. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right, we've got time for maybe one, maybe two quick questions. So raise your hand. I'll get my steps up. And
oh, Ricky Burke, I'm under the pressure.
wander over.
Great talk and great stats. You said a few times you love what you do. Why?
Because I'm challenged every day. I problem solve every day, and I have got an absolute thirst for learning. And I think that's a strong characteristic for anybody in security, but architecture specifically, because you will look at designs at 10 minutes before it meant to go live, and you've got to work it out. And it's fun. I love it.
Fantastic. Good question. Great answer.
I thought it was going to be a harder question, Ricky.
All right. Is there a harder question?
No, you don't have to ask me a harder question. I did want to say that there is a lot of data, and I've only tried to summarise some of it. So if there's something that you are interested in, I might have the answer here. Otherwise, we can source it for you. But there's a lot of data. There's someone there, Lucas.
Oh.
I'm trying to do a white paper too. Yep.
How do you differentiate between security architecture and, say, a head of security or CISO who's actually technical and knows what they're talking about?
I think a lot of us that have been in the industry a long time are moving into that CISO role. Luke is one of them. I'm going to throw him under the bus.
Don't do it.
No, and I've actually sat in a deputy CISO role as well. You have to take a step forward, and you have to let the people do what they're doing. Otherwise, as a CISO, you just become a roadblock. Security architects are still doing the doing. We may not be on the keyboard, but we have to do the analytics. We've got to look at the projects. We've got to make recommendations. A lot of the times, business, they might not like what you're saying, and they'll escalate to the CISO, but the CISO has to give you their full support. They have to give, I mean, eventually if they want to override you, they will. I've seen them do it. But your CISO's still got to be up here and trust his head of security architect and her engineers, whatever. They have to support their teams underneath them.
I have a very quick question. Have you thought about maybe allowing the data to be publicly available? Is the data publicly
I
available?
will make it publicly available.
Oh, fantastic. So
Yep,
that'll be an
yep.
opportunity for others.
Absolutely. I've been asked for that. So I'm going to upload it to GitHub. I'll put it on LinkedIn and, and I'm also trying to do a white paper, but I've got to be honest, there's so much data. There's so much data. So I've got to figure it out.
Fantastic. Can we have a round of applause for Lidia Giuliano, please?